Hey everybody, it's March 22nd, 2021, and we're looking at challenges to the post-world order today. I'm going to try to keep this under an hour, so I'm not going to have as many disparaging remarks about Texas as I usually do. Well, I kind of feel sorry for them, because they were the only Big 12 team this year to lose in the first round of the tournament. Moving on. Okay. Back in 1961, May 25th, 1961, President Kennedy made this outlandish statement that said, by the end of the decade, we are going to put a man on the moon and safely bring him back. I'm paraphrasing there. Why would he do this? Well, I'll tell you, because we were way behind the Soviets in the space race. Remember, the Soviets had Sputnik, so they had the first satellite, then they had the first dog up in space, they had the first man up in space, Yuri Gagarin, they had the first woman up in space, Valentina Tereshkova. They beat us in everything. So we were going to beat them to the moon. It's kind of like, giving them all the little bitty prizes, but we wanted the big prize. And so NASA got their tails in gear, and 8 years and 2 months later, which is that about, it's about 3,000, yeah, that's about almost exactly 3,000 days, Apollo 11. So Apollo 11 and the three guys, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, they're gonna shoot up there to the moon. I was thinking about the math that you have to know to do that, right? That's crazy. And if you've been paying attention over the past several years, we've had movies and stories come out that the true geniuses behind all the math were the women who didn't get any credit at the time, and now the stories are starting to come out. So that's very cool that they're finally getting their credit. But the computer system on the Apollo 11 rocket, you pull out your phone, and your phone today is like 1 billion times faster, the processor. Billion with a B. 1 billion times faster than the little bitty computer that was on the rocket that went to the moon. Anyway, July 20th of 1969. I remember it well. 650 million people around the world turned in. I didn't remember it. I was actually born the year later, but I would have remembered it because it's a big deal. It's such a big deal. You can argue that this is the greatest technological achievement, really ever. In one of my anthropology books that I use for class, the author says, the people that came over 40,000 years ago that went from Indonesia and crossed the little straits there and went into Australia 40,000 years ago, the original Aborigines, that was like as important as us landing on the moon. No? No. This was cool. So Michael Collins, he was the one that got to stay up in orbit around the moon. The other two, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, got into the lander, which they call the Eagle. There you go. See, look, the Eagle has landed, right? And they landed there in the Sea of Tranquility, what they named as Tranquility Base. They were there for a couple of hours. I think it was 4 hours, and then Neil Armstrong sets it all up and steps off the ladder there. A very, very famous picture, right? And you guys you've all seen that. You've seen the video. And he says, "That's one." Okay, listen carefully, right? "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Excuse me. Which is, oops. He meant to say, "That's one giant step." I'm sorry. That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. He didn't put the A in there, and so, you can argue it's the same thing when you don't put the A in there. But some people argue, no, that's misogynistic and feminist and all that. So sometimes when you see the quote, I have a quote. Oh, right. And you'll see the quote and you'll see the letter A in brackets, meaning, yeah, he kind of meant to say that. He just didn't get around to it. Just 20 or 19 minutes later, Buzz Aldrin's going to get off the ladder too, and they're going to play around on the moon for about, was it 2 hours or so? They're going to come back, and President Nixon is going to call them on the telephone. Did you know you could call people on the moon? Anyway, President Nixon, which is why we're talking about this. Plus, it's cool. I mean, the moon, right? So, we won. We beat the Soviets in the space race because we got to the moon. The Soviets, after this happened, the Soviets denied that they were working on trying to get somebody onto the moon. They had already put rovers on the moon. They were trying to get samples, like little bitty rocks and all that kind of stuff. They denied they were trying to get a person on the moon. Then it came out in 1989 that, yeah, they really were trying, but then they just couldn't figure out the technology to get them back safely. So, whatever. It is interesting that President Nixon, let's see, so the astronauts brought back like 40 pounds, maybe it was more than that, but like 40 pounds of moon rock. And so President Nixon had little bitty rice-sized grains of moon rock. He put them in these little, basically the size of coins, these little bitty doodads that he could hand out to presidents of different countries. It's like, hey, my country's been to the moon, and your country, oh, not so much. In fact, here you go. Here's a piece of the moon just for you. And that's cool to be able to give away pieces of the moon, right? I spent way too much time on this slide, but it's cool, guys. That's cool. Anything else I want to say about that? 12 people have walked on the moon. How many of them were non-Americans? The answer is nobody. They're all Americans. All right, moving on. Sure, let's just go right to Watergate. All right. Watergate. Think about all the other gates that are out there. When there's a big a brouhaha, when there's a big kerfluffle, and the press gets hold of it, and they say, "Oh, look, it's something gate." So, for example, Tom Brady and the deflated footballs, and was he a cheater? They called that Deflate Gate. And we have all sorts of gates out there. And the reason is because of this hotel named the Watergate Hotel, which is in Washington, D.C. So what's going on here is that the Democratic Party had their election campaign headquarters in the hotel on the 6th floor of the Watergate Hotel. Well, the 1972 election, Nixon's going to run again, and he's going to win. But there's a little controversy about bugging phones and taking pictures of documents. And Nixon's going to get embroiled in this. He's going to get all wrapped up in this. So the short version here is that the Committee for the Re-election of the President, which is an interesting acronym, Committee for the Re-election of the President, CREEP, CREEP. That CREEP paid 5 guys to break into the Democratic headquarters and bug their phones, to put little devices in their phones, and to take pictures. So these 5 guys were successful in what they did. They planted bugs in various phones. And then they found out, oh man, it's not as clear as we wanted to, so they're going to re-break in. They're going to go back and they're going to try to fix it. So the night of, do I have it? I don't have it. But anyway, June of 1972, these guys are going to break in to the Watergate Hotel on the 6th floor. And how they're going to do this is, they're going to take basically tape, and they're going to, when you open up a door, the little latch inside the door handle goes in. If you put a piece of tape on that and then you shut the door, if that tape's strong enough to hold that little latch, even if you lock the door, it doesn't lock, right? It just holds that latch in. So these burglars, they put tape on some doors so that when everybody went home, that they would they could just walk in and just open the doors. Well, a security guard found one of these doors that was taped. And he thought that was weird. So he undid the tape, he took the tape off, and he did his rounds again. And then he came back And there was tape on the door again that somebody had just retaped it. And so he knew that he had already taken that tape off, and oops, so he called the police. While the five guys were in the Democratic headquarters doing their burglary stuff, they had a lookout who was across the street who was supposed to be paying attention, and he wasn't paying attention. So when the police showed up, he was like watching TV or something, and so the police showed up. The police some of the police who were dressed as undercover hippies, just crazy stuff going on. Regardless, the five guys were found and arrested. So they're going to go to trial. And at this point, the president's good. It's, a couple of guys are breaking into the Democratic presidential headquarters, or into the Democratic headquarters. Well, then the money gets traced. Where did they get their $2,400 that they had on them in sequential $100 bills, right? It's very suspicious. Where did the money come from? Ultimately, the money is going to be traced back to the Committee for the Re-election of the President, Nixon. And so then that starts to blow up. And then, well, who authorized that money? Well, how high does that go? And at what point did Nixon get told all of this? So then it becomes a case of when, where, who. There's an informant named, well, his code name is called Deep Throat. Bob and a couple of reporters, Bob Woodward and the other guy who worked for I'm going to say the Washington Post. Oh man, I should look that up. But actually, no, I should know that. But anyway, one of the major newspapers there, they had an informant. His name was Deep Throat. And so when Bob Woodward wanted to get a hold of Deep Throat, the informant, the spy, he would take his flower pot that had a red flag on it. He'd move it on his windowsill, and then Deep Throat, the spy, would then take Bob Woodward's his personal copy of the newspaper, the daily newspaper, and he'd circle the number 20 on page 20, and then he'd draw a clock face, and then they would meet in this garage, this underground garage, parking garage. Crazy stuff, right? Crazy stuff. Regardless, it comes out that maybe Nixon knew some stuff. Well, here we are in the year 2021, and nobody's real for sure if he knew ahead of time, but he certainly knew what happened afterwards, right? Because he's being told by his advisors that things are going on. And the question becomes, at what point did Nixon say, okay, we need to basically scoot this all under the rug. We need to make sure that nobody finds out about this, that it was actually, Republican money, and so that all comes out. Well, here's the deal. In the White House, in the Oval Office, there is a voice recorder. It's voice-activated recorder. So anytime anybody talks inside the Oval Office, it's recorded for posterity, right? Because we want to know. Down the road. Well, while Nixon is in there cussing and cursing because he was a cusser, and he's talking about, well, we got to pay these people off. We got to pay these people off, and oops, that's a cover-up. That'll get you in trouble. So the tapes of him talking in the Oval Office with his buddies, they're going to be subpoenaed by the New York Times. The New York Times, of course, they're going to ask for the tapes. Well, the Supreme Court gets involved. The Supreme Court votes 8-0 that Nixon, you've got to give up the tapes, even though Nixon was claiming presidential immunity and presidential privilege and national security. The Supreme Court said, no, you got to give up the tapes, man. And so Nixon eventually releases the tapes. Well, in the tapes, there's an 18.5 minutes where it accidentally was erased. Whoops. And so when they subpoenaed the secretary who was in charge of that stuff, she's like, oh yeah, my fault. I was answering the phone, and my foot, which has different pedals like you're driving a car, and she was pushing the pedal while she was talking on the phone, and that actually accidentally erased the tapes for that 18.5 minutes, which, there you go. And then later it came out that no, while you're on the phone, she couldn't possibly have put her foot on the pedal because the phone was farther on the other side of her desk, and she couldn't reach that far, and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then Nixon was like, no, don't send out those tapes that has me cussing, using the F word and all that kind of stuff. And people were like, everybody knows you use the F word, dude. Just send it. The tapes come out. They're called the smoking gun tapes. And then ultimately, the House is going to start impeachment charges. Everybody who supported Nixon basically just started leaving. The Vice President, Spiro G. Agnew, was brought up on charges actually for embezzlement of money, like $30,000, when he was the mayor of Maryland. So the Vice President resigns. In the middle of this, President Nixon, let's see, the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General resign. It's just, everything's going crazy, and ultimately Nixon realizes he's not going to recover from this. And so on August 8th of 1974, Nixon signs the piece of paper, and it's really short. It basically says, and I can probably actually quote this, I hereby resign as President of the United States of America. I mean, period. And he signed it, and that was it. And he gave that letter to Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, and that's all she wrote. So, we have had a president that resigned. And here's our next president, President Ford. Now, President Ford, number 38, he's our first president to not be elected. I maybe should say he's our only president to not be elected as either president or vice president. All the other times that we've had a president, well, at this point, except for Nixon, all the other times that we've had a vice president move into the presidency is because the president has died. And so, but the vice president was elected, by the Electoral College. Well, not Ford. You see, and when Spiro T. Agnew, the first vice president, when he resigned from office, Gerald Ford was in Congress, and so Nixon appointed him, using the 25th Amendment, appointed him as the new vice president. And then that was ratified by the Senate. I think the vote was like 95-3 or something. So Ford was very well liked. And then also the House ratified him. It was like 370-35. So again, he was very well liked. When he became vice president, basically in December, he was told, dude, there's a good chance you're about to become president because Nixon's going through all this stuff, and keep your nose clean. So, known as the football president. Does he look like he played football? 1932, 1933, he was, 1934, he was the center, and he played linebacker too, for the Michigan Wolverines. And in fact, they won the national championship in 32 and 33, if I'm right. Anyway, so he's the football president. I mean, he looks like he's a football player, right? Regardless, when Nixon resigns, when Kissinger dated the letter, like 11:35 a.m., he had this little note on the letter that Nixon gave him. Secretary of State Kissinger then said, okay, I've now received this. Ford, you're now the President of the United States. And one of the first things that Ford did in his first 30 days as president, it was that he then pardoned Nixon for all, do I have it up there? Pardoned Nixon of all crimes that he, quote, may or may not have committed in the role as President of the United States. Right? So if you're pardoned by the President, that means you cannot be tried for a crime. Now look at that. For crimes that he may or may not have committed as President, in the role as President of the United States. So basically Nixon, whatever he did, whether he knew about it, whether he didn't know about it, whether he authorized the spending money to pay off people, whether he was part of this, it doesn't matter. Once you get the pardon, you get the pardon. And so he cannot be held responsible for that. You want to go watch a movie called Nixon versus Frost. It's a great, go check it out, Nixon versus Frost. It talks about how Nixon, after it was all done, and then he went back and he decided he was going to set the record straight, and it's a great movie. All right, what else do we know about Gerald Ford? He did a couple of things. Let's see, June 1975, we have the Helsinki Accords. Recognize the boundaries of the Soviet Union. So we're finally saying, okay, Soviet Union, we're going to officially draw your map. And establish more mutual respect between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Okay. Vietnam. In 1975, so that was summer of 1975, we are going to evacuate. Talking about the Americans, we're just going to evacuate. And remember that this was kind of the plan that Nixon had as he was finishing it up. We're just going to give it all to the South Vietnamese and let the South Vietnamese fight the North Vietnamese, and then we'll help them out, but we're going to withdraw all of our troops. So a famous picture here of Americans lining up there at the American embassy, I think that's in Saigon, and getting on the helicopters and flying off. We're just evacuating. And then a very, very famous picture here of the children running away from the napalm, the gas bombs. And so that picture, the Pulitzer winning prize picture here, was published in newspapers around the United States, and that, it's pretty easy to argue that this picture right here helped people, or it influenced people to say, we need to get out of Vietnam because we're doing this to kids, so bad, bad, bad. All right, so what happens? We leave, and almost immediately the North Vietnamese overrun the South Vietnamese. So technically, yep, that was a loss for us. Although you might argue, if you're a super U.S. homer, like me, you might argue, well, we didn't actually lose that because we were already gone. We already left, and then South Vietnam lost. But yeah, it cost $188 billion, which today we laugh at because we're talking about trillions now. But 156,000 Americans were killed in action. 300,000 were wounded, lost face, and lost confidence in the United States military prowess. So we were no longer perfect in our win-loss record. Although, you might argue 1812 it was a tie. So, but there you go. But we now have a loss on our on our war record. Okay, back to the home front. We have Title IX. So Title IX, passed 1972, says that you can't discriminate versus sex. So this is why we have boys and girls basketball teams in public schools. This is why we have boys and girls, or we have baseball for boys and softball for girls. This is why we have boys and girls tennis, boys and girls track, boys and girls cross country. This is why we have, so the rule says, basically, that if you have an activity for boys, you must have an equal opportunity activity for girls, or if not, you have to allow girls to be in the activity with boys. So for example, football, what is the equivalent for girls in football? Well, there is no equivalent. Baseball there's softball, and basketball there's basketball. But there's no equivalent for football. So, unless you have a girls' football team, which nobody does, then you have to allow girls to be on the football team. And we have had girls on our football team. In fact, one of our most outstanding kickers, she kicked like a 53-yard field goal a couple of years ago. She's long since graduated, but there you go. So that's Title IX. Anything that boys are allowed to do, girls must be given the chance to do as well. Congress approves the Equal Rights Amendment in 1978. And so there it is, the Equal Rights Amendment. So this is going to be an amendment we're adding to the Constitution. So like we've talked about this before, some of them are very, very short, like the 13th Amendment, or the 12th Amendment, 13th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. They're very short. The slavery amendments, they're very short. This one is very short too. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. So you can't discriminate based on your sex. You'd think that would be an easy sell, right? That that'd be an easy sell. So you need to get 38 states to pass it, because once Congress passes it, and since you'll learn all this stuff in government next year, that you got to have the states ratify it, right? So you got to have 38 states. Well, 35 states ratified it pretty quickly, and then it stopped. They only got 35 states. And the argument is, why would you not pass that? Well, a bunch of conservative females got together and said, hey, look, we need to push this out there and say, we don't want this to pass. Females were pushing for this not to pass. Their argument was this: if we pass this, that means that females are then going to be put on the front lines of the military. If we pass this, females are not going to get those special considerations when it comes to working conditions that we've talked about. If we pass this, what is the role of the housewife versus the role of the house husband? If we pass this, women aren't going to necessarily get the advantage when it comes to keeping the children in a divorce or getting alimony money in a divorce. If we pass, so I mean, I see what they're saying. So what happened with this amendment? Well, ultimately they had put a clock on it, and they said, so it wasn't 78, no, 72. They put a clock on it, and they said, if it doesn't pass by this time, then it's dead. Well, they only had 35 states that signed it. And it passed the time, and then Congress extended it, and with the president too, and they extended it, and they said, okay, well, let's push it to 78. And we didn't have enough states sign it, and they pushed it to 1980, and they didn't have enough states sign it. And here we are in the year 2021, you're like, wait, we still haven't had 38 states sign this? Well, interestingly enough, Virginia in the year 2020, last year, they did sign it, they ratified it, and they were the 38th state. But here's the deal with this. It's in this huge limbo, because between the year 2020 and back in 1980-ish, 5 states decided to repeal their vote on this, which then that becomes a constitutional issue. Once you vote for it, can you then unvote for it? I mean, can you do that? So then the question is, if you can, then we're way below the minimum threshold. But if you can't, right? So I mean, could Texas? Oh, I'm going to be nice. Could Louisiana just say, we're going to unvote for the First Amendment? I mean, could they do that? Is that possible? So we still don't know where we are on that. All right, finally on this particular slide. Oof. Roe versus Wade. All right, 1972, Supreme Court of the United States ruled, this is an abortion case. So this is the abortion case. Now, we've had hundreds of abortion cases since then, but this is the abortion case that started it all. So what's going on? We have Norma Jean, and she lives in Texas, and she wants to have an abortion. Well, the rule in Texas at that time was that you could not have an abortion unless carrying the baby full term would put the mother in danger of dying. Well, she sued and said, no, that's unconstitutional. My 14th Amendment gives me the right to life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness, that kind of stuff, the 14th Amendment. And so I have the right to privacy. And privacy, that's abortion. So you can't tell me no. Well, the various courts argue and said no and yes and no, and it's going to get kicked up to the Supreme Court. Now, here's the deal with this. The abortion cases, there were other abortion cases before Roe versus Wade, but they'd always been kicked out because it takes 2-3 years to get to the Supreme Court if you go through the natural channels to get there. And in 2 or 3 years, if you deny a female, you say you can't have an abortion. I was about to say she can't hold it in for 3 years, right? So these kids are born, and the cases are moot, which means that they are no longer applicable because the kid's already born. Well, Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court finally said, look, if we keep doing that rule that says, it doesn't matter, the kid's already born, so we're not going to rule on this, then we'll never have an abortion case, and so let's just go ahead and do this. Yes, one of the most controversial cases of all in Supreme Court history, because it's such a sensitive issue. Here's the short version, and we're going to talk more about this next year on how it works out. But the Supreme Court said, okay, abortion is going to be legal in the United States, comma, based on the trimester system. So here it is. In the first trimester, so we're talking about the first 3 months, a state cannot stop you from getting an abortion in the first 3 months. In the second trimester, months 4, 5, and 6, in the second trimester, a state may put reasonable health requests or requirements on a mother to jump through these hoops before she can get an abortion. And we're going to talk about all those different ones later, not in this class, but next year, with regard to you have to get certain signatures, and you got to tell your mom, and you got to hear the fetal heartbeat, and all sorts of crazy stuff that different states are requiring. And then in the third trimester, so that would be 7, 8, 9, months 7, 8, 9, a state can stop you from getting an abortion. The state has the ability to do that. Now, some states say that you can have it whenever, but a state can stop you unless there is a risk to the health of the mother or any other extenuating circumstances that are that crazy, like rape or something like that. So, that's Roe versus Wade. And that's going to kick off a lot of issues. One of my darker cartoons here. Where are all the young people? I'm the youngest one here, and I'm 36. Oh, they couldn't be here today. And in the background says, Happy 35th anniversary Roe versus Wade. Think about it, you'll get it. It's dark. All right, moving on. Okay, Milliken versus Bradley. Three Supreme Court cases real quick. Milliken versus Bradley says you cannot force a school district to bus students across district lines. Now remember, Brown versus Board of Education said that you cannot have a white school and a black school. You have to desegregate them. There's no longer separate but equal. And so what happened then? We talked about this last video or 2 videos ago. We said that we had the white flight. Oh, well, if all the kids of different colors are going to be put into the school, I don't want my kid to be there, so I'm going to go out to another school district. The argument is then, is the state required to bus kids of different race kids across district lines? And Milliken versus Bradley said no. You can only bus students within a district. So, for example, Oklahoma City has, 5, 6, 7, 8 high schools, 9, 10, 11, 12 high schools. You can bus from way south side Oklahoma City all the way to north side Oklahoma City to make sure the populations are all desegregated. But you can't cross 44th Street over here from Oklahoma City to Western Heights. You can't cross county line from Western Heights into Mustang. So that's going to reinforce the idea of white flight. That's Milliken versus Bradley. In 1978, we had the University of California versus Bakke. So remember, we talked about affirmative action. Affirmative action said you could base your selection process, for example, for a job or for scholarships or getting into a university, you could use race as one of your bases to do that. Mr. Bakke was a 30-year-old military graduate from the military, and he wanted to go into medical school, and he was denied entrance. He was white. He was denied entrance. And he argued that the rule in the University of California at that time was if there's 100 spots, that 16 of those spots were designated as a quota to go to non-white students. And he argued that if you look at his transcript and you look at all the stuff he did with his life, and you look at his grade point average, his grade point average and his transcript and all of his stuff was better than the vast majority of those 16 people that were being put in there because of a quota. So the Supreme Court looked at that and they said, yeah, that's kind of interesting. It actually is kind of reverse discrimination. You're discriminating against white people if you use quotas. So, new rule, you can't use quotas. Now, you can absolutely use race as a factor, as a basis, but you cannot say, this many people are going to be black, this many people are going to be Asian, this many people. You can't do that. That's California versus Bucky. Justice Thurgood Marshall, okay, so last time we talked about him. He was the lawyer who represented Miss Brown in Brown v. Board of Education, right? He was the lawyer that helped out Sipule and McLaren. So he's the lawyer. He's now on the Supreme Court, and he's going to the first African American on the Supreme Court as justice, and he is going to argue that this is bad. It's actually going backwards. That Bakke versus California, or California versus Bakke, that's going backwards. So he dissented against that. In 1978, United States versus Wheeler, we had a situation where a Native American was, he committed a couple of crimes, and he was tried in his tribal court. So he was found guilty, and his punishment was just pretty light, just like less than $200 in fines, or like 6 months in jail. It was a very, very, very small punishment, but he was found guilty. Well, then the district court, so that was in the tribal court, the district court then grabbed him and decided to try him for rape. Well, he argued double jeopardy. The Fifth Amendment says you cannot be tried twice for the same crime. And he said, I've already been tried in the tribal court, and I was found guilty. So you can't try me again in the American court, even though this all happened here in America, but I was on tribal lands when it happened, blah, blah, blah. And the Supreme Court said, look, Justice Powell argued, he said, look, if a tribe, talking about Native American tribes, if a Native American tribe does not relinquish its sovereignty, because, you know, in the Constitution it says, make treaties with other countries and with the various Indian nations. So a tribe is a sovereign government. Well, Justice Powell, Justice Stevens, one of them, argued that said double jeopardy does not apply if it's a sovereign state. So, for example, if Mexico punishes me for something, the United States can also punish me. If France punishes me for something, then the United States can also punish me for something. And so the justices argued, and they said, look, a tribe is like a separate country in a sense, and so therefore we can get you again. So double jeopardy doesn't work. What's the moral of the story? Don't commit a crime on Indian territory, tribal lands. 1776, I remember this, 1776. Goodness, the bicentennial. The bicentennial, 200 years later, 1776, we have President Ford going against Governor Jimmy Carter from Georgia, and a whole bunch of blue states. Somebody else, right? Oh yeah, this guy by the name of Reagan. Reagan was governor of California, and he wasn't really even on the ballot anywhere except like up in Washington. Some people voted for him, and he's like, yeah, I'm not even really running for president. So anyway, but Jimmy Carter, look at that, we're on number 39. We're getting close. It's interesting. The very first thing I have on him, he's a peanut farmer from Georgia. He's also the governor of Georgia. One of his campaign promises was, I will never lie to the American people. That's my Georgian accent. Okay, I'll do more later. So he's going to have a list of things he's done here. Let's see. He pardoned all the Vietnam draft dodgers. So remember, when the president pardons you, it's a get out of jail free card. If you dodge the draft, you understand that, right? So Vietnam comes up. That's the last time that we had a draft, and so a whole bunch of people, their names were pulled out of a hat, and a whole bunch of people were like, "I'm not going. So I'm going to move to Canada, or I'm going to move to Mexico, or I'm just not going to show up." Well, if you got caught not going after your name was pulled out of the hat, then you could be sentenced to jail or with a fine or jail. I said that twice. And so President Carter said, okay, we're going to pardon all of those people who didn't want to go to war in Vietnam. Created the Department of Energy, created the Department of Education, battled stagflation, inflation, deflation, stagnant, stagflation. Camp David Accords, the Iran hostage situation in the 1980 boycotting. All right, so let's talk about it real quick. I mean, I'm going to be done in like 10 minutes. Carter's humanitarian diplomacy. So Carter, if you look over this little chart, when he was elected, so it's like his popularity. So when he becomes president, he's, pretty popular. Oh, but then as president, when he was a candidate, he was very popular. As president, no, Carter tends to be towards the bottom of the, yay, Carter. Camp David Accords, he was very popular. Look how popular he was. And then, the Iran hostage crisis. We'll get to that in a second. It's pretty easy to argue that President Carter is way more popular, like way, way more popular now that he's out of office. Gosh, 1980 when he left office. He's still kicking around. He's the oldest president ever. Like the oldest person to still be alive who was president. Because he's like 98 now, 99. And he goes out and he Habitat for Humanity. He's out there with his hammer and putting houses together. Good for him. As president, not so much. Now, again, there were some positive things. Let's see. He mediated peace talks between Israel and Egypt. That's pretty important. Let's see. Pledged to give Panama Canal back to Panama by the year 2000. That ended up happening. And wanted to resume full diplomatic relations with the PRC, the People's Republic of China. Okay. So there's a new bad guy in town. We were talking about the Soviet Union, but pretty much at this point, the Soviet Union, they're about to have themselves a really bad day in the 1980s. So we got a new bad guy in town, Iran. So here's how this all worked out. Inflation was at 13%. 13% inflation. Ooh, doggies, that's a lot. In 1979. And so Carter's going to call for conservation. He's going to tell people, hey, look, you need to cut way back on gasoline. You need to cut way back on oil. You need to turn down your thermostats. You need to cut way back. And at the same time, we have a situation in Iran where the guy, the president, the Shah is what we call him, the Shah of Iran, who is giving us all this cheap oil from Iran because we had put him in as the president. He is going to be overthrown. He's going to be overthrown by the Ayatollah. So here's the Shah and Ayatollah Khomeini. Ayatollah means the head priest. We'll use that word, priest. So Ayatollah Khomeini is going to overthrow the Shah. The Shah is going to, as soon as he gets overthrown, he's going to get on his jet plane and he's going to fly to the United States and ask for asylum, which means that we're going to keep him and the Iranians can't get him back. Now he's going to claim that he needs to come over here because he has cancer and that we have the best cancer treatment plans in the world. And he does have cancer, and at that point you could argue we did have the best in the world. So he was over here for a legitimate reason, but the Ayatollah not happy about that. The Ayatollah is going to demand from the United States that they give Iran back the Shah from the United States. Oof, that's a terrible sentence. Sorry about that. So let's see. Khomeini called the United States the Great Satan. When he talked about us, he didn't even say the United States. He was like, the Great Satan. And stop exporting oil to us. Ooh, we had all that cheap oil from Iran, and now we got no oil from Iran. I wonder what that does to gasoline prices. Oh, and then OPEC also raised oil prices. That's not good. That's not good. Some quotes from the Ayatollah. Americans are the great Satan, the wounded snake. One thing I graduate everyone on is the great explosion which has occurred in Washington's Black House, and the very important scandal which has gripped leaders of America. See what he's doing in the White House, the Black House. Okay. When anyone studies a little or pays a little attention to the rules of Islamic government, Islamic politics, Islamic society, and Islamic economy, he will realize that Islam is a very political religion. Anyone who will say that religion is separate from politics is a fool. He does not know Islam or politics. He's taking a shot at us, right? So, just for funsies, this guy, and he is a thorn in Ayatollah Khomeini's backside. His name is Salman Rushdie, and he's going to write a book called, well, he's going to write several books, but his fourth book, is called The Satanic Verses. And in the book, Salman Rushdie is from Britain, from the United Kingdom, and he's going to write a book called The Satanic Verses. And in the Satanic Verses, they talk about. He weaves a story around a certain verse or two that's in the Quran that may or may not have been said by Muhammad, or may not have been inspired by the devil. Various interpretations, right? Well, he publishes the book, and then the Ayatollah said that he's going to declare a fatwa on Salman Rushdie. And a fatwa basically says, we're going to need all the people of Islam to go kill this guy. Kill this guy. Basically saying, yeah, well, there you go. An assassination order on this guy. Salman Rushdie is still with us. That was back in 1980, right? 1988 when that happened. He's still with us today. He's still hiding. Occasionally shows up. And in fact, just in the year 2016, Iran and other states, Islamic states, put another $600,000 on the fatwa, and now I think that it's up to a $3.4 million bounty on his head. Hey, I just thought that was interesting. All right, the Malaise speech. I was thinking about reading it to you in Jimmy Carter's voice, but I'm just going to do like one or two lines. Here we go. I want to talk to you right now about a fundamental threat to American democracy. I do not refer to the outward strength of America, a nation that is at peace tonight everywhere in the world with unmatched economic power and military might. The threat is nearly infinite. Oh, you can read it for yourself. But the point is, he's going to, in this speech, the Malaise speech, he basically says this. Look, we have too much stuff. American society is geared around the idea of whoever dies with the most toys wins. That, you should think about it. Some of you right now are like, I need to go out and get the newest iPhone, right? I'm right. And so whoever dies with the most toys wins. And President Carter says, we need to step back from this philosophy. Not everybody needs 12 televisions in their home. Not everybody needs the newest, coolest sports car. This is bad for American society. What we need to do is we need to conserve energy. We need to drive the speed limit. We need to take public transportation. We need to do the buddy-buddy system and carpools. We need to set your thermometers so we can, thermostats, so we can, right? This speech went over very, very, very well for some people. And others really, really, really hated it. Because, especially the people with all the toys. Did I say 10 minutes? 10 minutes from now. 1979, Carter's going to sign the SALT II treaty with Brezhnev. So remember, the SALT I treaty was that we're going to only have X amount of nuclear weapons in the world, and the Soviet Union and the United States, that's all we're going to have. And then that treaty expired, and so Carter's going to sign, he's going to make the second treaty, SALT II treaty, which then Congress, the Senate's not going to ratify, because I guess we just want to have more nuclear weapons than everybody. In 1979, the USSR invades Afghanistan, which is going to turn out to be their Vietnam in hindsight, because we can see that now that we're looking at it. But you think about, where's Afghanistan on the map? right there. See, I know you all knew where you, because you all paid attention in geography class. Afghanistan right next to Iran, and President Carter was like, whoa, if you invade Afghanistan, then Iran's going to get involved, and Iran's already irritated with us, and so Soviet Union, we're going to ask you to, get out of Afghanistan. Of course, the Soviet Union is like, no, and then we're going to boycott the Soviet Union. We're going to put that's what I just said, we're going to put an embargo on the Soviet Union, so we're not going to trade with them. The Soviet Union is like, okay, whatever. And then we're going to boycott the Summer Olympics. Now, the Winter Olympics, the 1980 Winter Olympics, were held in Lake Placid, right? Lake Placid, is that right? In New York. And that's the one where the United States hockey team beat the Soviet Union hockey team. It was a big deal because the United States, it was just a bunch of college kids, whatever, against the professional Teamster USSR all manly men squad, and we beat them 4-3 in the semifinal round. And at the last 5 seconds, and Al Michaels was like, "Do you believe in miracles?" And then, which is interesting enough because that was actually the semifinal round, and then the United States went on and beat Finland in the gold medal round, which is probably more impressive because Finland, right? Because of hockey. But regardless, that was in the winter. In the summer, we boycotted, which means that we didn't show up. In fact, 66 countries did not show up to the Summer Olympics in 1980, which was held, interestingly enough, in Moscow. So we just didn't show up. Which means if you start looking down through like medals, for some reason you're like, you know what? I want to see how many medals we won in 1980. Well, we didn't win any in the summer because we weren't there, and a lot of all the blue countries weren't there. So a lot of the blue countries. But that's okay. In 1984, the Soviet Union boycotted our Olympics, which we held over here in Los Angeles. And in 1984, we got a lot of medals on that. So it all works. It all does what it does. Carter's he's going to propose a rapid deployment force that we had already started to think about. Remember that, and with Strategic Air Command with Eisenhower. We're going to try to get back to this because look, the Soviet Union, they're trying to expand, and we're going to stop them. I think this is the last slide. It is the last slide. All right, I'll put that down. All right, the Iranian Hostage Crisis. So when the Ayatollah Khomeini, when he overthrew the Shah got on his plane and he flew to the United States. The Ayatollah told us, the great Satan, he told us to give him back the Shah. We said no. A bunch of militant Iranian college kids decided to storm the American embassy at Tehran. And so you kind of see them climbing over the fence here. There were 52 people. Well, there were more than that. A couple of them were let go, but 52 hostages were taken in the embassy, and then those 52 hostages were spread throughout Tehran so that the United States couldn't bring in a secret commando force and rescue the hostages. President Carter actually did try to send a secret commando force, and then we had a helicopter accident and 8 Americans died in the attempt. So it was a huge black eye for the United States when it comes to this kind of stuff. But 444 days that these 52 hostages, these American hostages, were held in Iran. 444 days. So you ask, well, how did it finally end? Well, it ended basically with President Carter losing the next election, and President Reagan is going to become the new president. And so, I say "and so" a lot. I'm going to work on that. And I won't say it. When President Reagan becomes president, what is that, on January 20th of 1981, at noon, like 3 or 4 minutes later, like 12:04, the hostages are released. They all lived happily ever after. But again, the point here is, oh look, the United States and Iran, we can't play nice together. We can't play nice together. That's okay. In the year 2021, we've all solved that problem. Wait, we haven't solved that problem. All right. That's all, folks. See you next time. Be good.